Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us for our third of our Women in Sailing webinars. I'd like everyone to welcome Lindy Hardcastle. Lindy, you might remember, was one of our coaches when we did have the Ladies of the Sea coaching regatta, not this March, but the March before. Lindy's actually agreed to join us at the last minute today because unfortunately Nikki from WA just had too many things get in the way and wasn't able to make it. So welcome, Lindy, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's great that you've got so many people.
I know, it's wonderful. And if anyone does have any questions as we're going along, please just pop them in the chat box, and I will try to answer them, or we'll see what Lindy has to say. Sandy says hi, but yeah, I'm sure you'll recognise many of the names there. So actually what I want to do is start out, because we didn't actually do this at the Ladies of the Sea Regatta. Lindy, tell us a little bit about your sailing background. So how did you get into it?
Well, like a lot of people, I guess I met a man. No, I met my partner Will when I was 18, and he's a yacht designer, and he did a lot of sailing, and I kind of started sailing to stay with him at that stage. We lived in Cowes on the Isle of Wight for a while, and I learned to windsurf over there, and then came back to Sydney. I was working as a sailmaker, and so through my early 20s I worked for Lee Sails and Hood Sailmakers in Sydney, and we did a lot of time doing deliveries and going to racing programs. I went back to the UK with him in the early 80s, and we spent 5 years delivering boats and working on race programs around England and Europe and the United States. So we did a lot of sailing. Yeah,
sounds like quite an adventure. So what sort of size boats were you doing those deliveries on?
A lot of them were the race boats that we were taking, so they were 40-45 foot. And we did some big deliveries for like with friends and so on 60 footers, but that was probably the biggest boat that we went on. I have done a delivery to New Zealand on a 65 foot ketch since then, but yeah, that's probably the biggest yacht I've been on doing a delivery. But yeah, we were generally taking the boats that we were racing, and so we were sailing them deliveries with short crew and lots of sail and a very light boat. So it wasn't exactly an ideal cruising boat. A lot of the time we used to sail them a lot of the time with 3 reefs and a 3 up to make sure that we got them there in one piece. So, and there'd usually be 3 or 4 of us on board.
And then how many would come on for a race crew?
12.
Okay.
But I often didn't do the actual race. I would, or 10 or 12, depending what size the boat was. I wouldn't do the race. I'd end up hanging around on shore doing all the food and the logistics, and not actually racing on it when they were doing Admiral's Cup and 1 Ton Cup and all those things. So yeah, I wasn't good enough at that stage.
Still sounds quite adventurous to me.
Well, you learn a lot when you're watching as well and being a part of it. So it's a good way to get into it, I think.
But then you did eventually race.
Yeah, when I came back to Sydney, we got married, and then started racing in Sydney. And I mean, it's one thing, isn't it, that you end up getting. I was on various boats while we were away as well, where we were racing. I was on an all-girls crew in Spain, where we did the King's Cup. And you go from being the least experienced person on the delivery to being one of the more experienced people on the boat for a race, and that was quite entertaining and quite an eye opener too. But I think I've always found that being one of the least experienced person on a boat makes you learn a lot faster than if you're the most experienced person on the boat and you're trying to show everybody else how to do it. But it's an interesting process, isn't it?
And that must have been something else. I'm assuming that you're racing in Spain and you've got a whole lot of nationalities on board.
Oh, they were all Spanish, and so they all spoke to each other. They were all dinghy racers, and they hadn't done a lot of yacht sailing. And there were 2 girls that spoke English, so they were my communication link to the rest of them. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was my first all-girls sailing regatta, really, and it was quite an eye opener from sailing with the guys for so long. It was quite different and I mean, we had a good time, and then they told me that the following year they were going to do the Route de Rhum, which is across the Atlantic, and they wanted me to come with them, and I just flat out said no right then and there. I thought, no, I don't think I could spend 3 weeks on a boat with 2 people that can speak English and everyone else that can't. So when we came back,
at least you know your limits.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, I met Nance Frank overseas when we were sailing in the Caribbean, and she told me that she was getting a crew together to do the Whitbread race, and I flat out told her that I wasn't going to do the Whitbread race on an all-girls boat as well, because I thought that wasn't really what I needed to do. But yeah,
somehow you did get involved further down the track, didn't you?
Yeah, well, we did not in Whitbread, but we were we did the all-girls trip to Hobart with Adrian and Vanessa, who spoke last week, and Adrian Carlin and Sue Craven and Lindsay Barwood, and 12 of us on a 40-foot boat did the race in '92, and that kind of changed my perception of women sailing. I actually told Adrian that if she got a sponsor to do the Whitbread race, that I'd come with her at that stage, but I ended up falling pregnant about 5 months later, so that was the end of that.
And so you enjoyed the experience going sailing with the girls. What sort of preparation did you do in the lead up to it?
Well, we had probably a year of sailing together. So we did Southport in July on a smaller boat on Pemberton, which was Richard Hudson's 3/4 tonner. And that was only, I think, 34 feet. And then we, Adrian chartered Beyond the Thunderdome for the Hobart race. And that was funny because Will had done the Hobart race on it like the year that it was built, which was then, I don't know, 8 or 9 years beforehand. And so we knew the boat quite well, and Warren Johns chartered it to us. So we went through, after we got back from Southport, we started sailing we did the winter series on a 45-footer on Mandrake, and then we all hopped onto the 1-tonner in about November, and we did Bird Island and all of the races in the lead up to Hobart. But at that stage, we were all doing quite a lot of offshore stuff anyway, and we had quite a few people that were telling us that we shouldn't be doing it, and that we shouldn't.
It just pushes you harder, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it was interesting, really. It's quite funny, but I mean, we definitely held our own for a lot of that race. We ended up splitting the mainsail in Bass Strait and sewing it back together and putting it back up the next morning and losing it again that evening in a totally different place. So the mainsail wasn't exactly a quality piece of equipment on the boat, and we didn't take a spare. So, well, I mean, you don't generally. And it was delaminating before we started, and I was concerned about it. But it definitely couldn't handle what we were in Bass Strait. So.
And as the sailmaker on board, does that mean you were below stitching it together?
Yeah, Amanda Swan, who was with Tracy Edwards in the Whitbread race, she was on our crew as well, and so she'd done. She was a sailmaker as well, and the two of us sat there being a sewing machine for about 6 hours sewing the main back together, where I was pushing the palm and needle up through the sail and she was grabbing it and pushing it back down. So we just did that for 6 hours and sewed up 2 pockets and a luff, and it split in a totally different place the next evening, like 12 hours later. We just looked at each other and we thought, well, we're not sewing it back together again. It's gone. So we shoved it in a bag and finished the race with the Storm Trisolar, which was not terribly effective, really. Yeah.
And so what was your role on that boat?
I was the main sheet trimmer. And then as we all swapped around a lot, but I was trimming the main as we started and sailed out the harbour. And we had Sue Crafer and Lindsay Marwood on the jib. And we had a great crew. It was really it was good, and I think that there was a lot of things that I hadn't thought about, having 12 women sailing together on a boat. It was quite different. Like the watches and everything were fine. Everyone was good with that, but I think just the whole concept of everyone, dare I say, going to the loo down below when it's rough and everything else, like. I guess when you're sailing with guys, you don't have so much of that problem, and it was.
Yes, you pretty much have it to yourself. So
yeah, that's right. And the hygiene was, yeah. I mean, there was issues with the engine as well. I mentioned earlier we had diesel spillage, and so there was all sorts of horrible smells coming out of the engine anyway. And it was, yeah, it was not a nice place to be down below for the last day and a half of that trip. And,
oh well, I'm very impressed because yeah, I certainly haven't done that journey, and I don't know if I ever will. I might stick with my like a shower at the end of the day and being able to.
I've been saying for years I wouldn't do it, and I've been to Coffs Harbour 8 times. I've been to Southport 5 times, and so I've done all these races north and done lots of sailing. But I'd always said, oh, I won't go to Hobart unless it's on a Swan 65 with an ice maker and a fridge, you know. And there I was with 12 women on a 40-footer, so it didn't quite play out the way that I was saying. But I think that once you get down there and you close on that coast of Tasmania, I fully get why people do it 50 times, because it is just an ultimate adventure, and it is just an incredible piece of coastline to sail into, and just an amazing place, really. And like the whole event of it is fantastic, you know. Like, it's a lot of fun, and it's a massive feeling of elation when you get there, and achievement for actually, yeah, getting down there and doing what you do. And it is it's something special, I think. Yeah, and it always has been. Yeah.
Right.
I'd even probably go again now that I've grown up. My kids are grown up.
That's right. Your children are old enough to say, off you go, Mum, you'll be fine.
Yeah. They don't want anything for their birthdays anymore.
I can see Victoria's got a hand up. If anyone does have any questions, please put them in via the chat function and we'll ask them. So, Lindy, you've recently become a boat owner.
Yes. Yeah.
How's that responsibility?
Yeah, well, it's funny because it's with some very good friends of mine that I've been doing the ladies' twilights on Pittwater with for 20 years with Sue Walters, who you know quite well as well.
Yes, I sailed in a 470 with her for a while.
Yeah, that's right. And you did the match racing with her, didn't you?
That's right.
Yeah. And and Sue and I have been doing the ladies' twilights at RPA since they started. I think it was 25 years ago. Because I was. I just had my daughter.
I think we're all aging ourselves, aren't we?
Yeah, we're feeling very grown up, aren't we? Yeah, and she's turning 25 next week, so I think that's how long we've been doing it for. And we she's got a boat called Cape Fear, which some good friends of mine took to Hobart a few years ago on an all-girl crew as well. Simone and Mandy Wilmot and some other girls were on it and did a Hobart race on it, and it's been up in Pittwater. I think Sue and Murray have owned it for 12 years, and oh no, maybe not that long, maybe it's 8. And we've been doing the Tuesday night races, and so yeah, I recently bought into that, which has been a lot of fun because we're going to get a new mainsail now, so we might get our name back on the trophy next year. Who knows?
Who knows?
It's not that we're competitive or anything.
All right. Well, one of the things that we've been talking over the last couple of weeks is communication and organising your crew. So people have been out on the water the last 2 weeks, and actually we've had Andrew Parks from North Sails come out and having a look at everyone's sail trim as well. Generally he's had some really small observations, small things like, have a look at where your jib car's set up, have a look at where your traveller's set up. A lot of the time I think he's telling people to pull their main on more to try and balance their boat. And, I have to say, usually by the end of the session, everybody was looking way more settled. And I think that's always a sign of a good boat, when it's relatively easy to steer and you're not having to play too much main sheet to keep it on its feet. And if you are having to dump main all the time, I think that's always a signal that you need to go and readjust, look at all your controls and see what you need to do to settle it down. And then we've also been talking about anticipation, because I think no sooner is it settled down, then you really do need to think, well, what next? If I'm going to, if the breeze comes up, what am I going to do? And if the breeze softens off again, what am I going to do? So, you know,
Change gears, it's always important. And I mean, that's why it's so important too for the crew to be giving the feedback to the person steering, and the person steering to be giving the feedback to the crew, to have those channels of communication open, like you say, so that everyone knows what's going on and can adjust their trim and adjust all of the dynamics of the balance of the boat in order to accommodate where you're going and what you're doing.
So as the main sheet trimmer, what sort of communication, I mean, what would you be talking to your skipper about?
I think we used to talk a lot about where we were in the fleet and whether we wanted height and to pinch it up, if you like, to get height and dial down the speed, I guess, by pinching, or whether you wanted to loosen it off and run to sail fat so that you could get underneath someone that you were approaching, or to get more speed onto the boat. And I mean, that depends where you're heading to in terms of the course and what the traffic is around you. And you know, once you're out on the ocean, you just want to find that optimal speed groove where your boat's going as fast as it possibly can on the course. It's as close to where you want to be going, you know. And I guess that's the main thing that you're looking for, and you have so much more fewer restrictions by doing it offshore than you do in the harbour racing around a racetrack, that it is quite a different thing. I mean, I know when we were sailing across the Atlantic, it was like, oh, do we need to jibe? Oh, will we do it today? No, we'll wait till tomorrow. You know, like it doesn't really matter. and that, whereas on a race course, it's much more tactical and much more intense, because you do have to tack right here and you do have to jibe right there. And it makes such a big difference with you and the rest of the fleet making those decisions quickly and being able to call it and have everyone do what they need to do to turn the corners. And like, it's essential basically when you're inside the harbour to be able to do that quickly and effectively.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to identifying individual roles and what's your responsibility in that particular move. Maneuver, whether it's the bear away or going into the tack or going into the jibe.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about today was actually tacking. So my observation from just the last 2 weeks was when we're tacking, there are varying degrees of efficiency, and I mean, I think one of the things with tacking is you've got to realise that the manoeuvre is, you're giving away something anyway. Like, you're turning the boat, you're slowing it down, and the bigger and heavier the boat is, you've really got to weigh up, is this manoeuvre really going to be to my advantage, or am I better off to continue? And that's often quite difficult to do. But what are some of the things that you might look for, Lindy, before going into attack?
I mean, from a crew member's perspective, as a headsail trimmer, the two things that are essential in attack is that the person releasing it only releases it as the boat turns into the tack, and so like you hang on to it until that last minute when it starts to luff, and then you throw it completely off, so that the breeze hits the other side of it and flicks it through for you. But it's also important that the helm turns the boat and almost holds it for a moment, so that the headsail can blow through, and then the new sheet hand pulls it on, like gets 10 foot of sheet through the winch before the boat's hard on the breeze on the other tack. And so that it is that whole dynamic between the three of you to get it right. Because if you let it go too late and it's fully pressured up backwards, one, that's slow, two, it's pulling the bow down, and three, when it blows through, it's going to be a mile out the other side that someone's going to have an awfully long time working and winding to get it back in again. And your steerer won't have that speed out of the tack. Whereas if you can do the whole thing systematically, where as the boat turns, you take 2 turns off the winch, and then you throw it completely as it starts to luff, and so that it flicks through and then the new sheet hands pulling on it as hard as they can as you're coming into that tack, so that by the time you get it on, it's almost only a minor adjustment to get it in, because it's already there.
It's that last 5% that you can bring in with a winch quite easily.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
My observation last week that was that a lot of the boats were turning too far, so you're coming out of the turn too deep, and consequently the poor old trimmer was really having to grind an awful lot of sail in to get it in there. So as a helm, when you're setting up to tack, have a think about, is there a flat piece of water coming up that I might be able to turn the boat in? And of course you want to always look over your shoulder and make sure that there's nothing you're going to crash into once you tack.
Yeah, that's right.
But sometimes it might help to also have a reference on the land. And then the other thing is to don't spin the boat too fast. You do want to make sure your boat's up to speed before you go into the tack, because if you start slow, you're just going to make it slower by stalling it going up into the no-go zone. But so you want to be up to speed, but you don't have to do the tack fast, because I think that's sometimes where you do get into trouble, where the old sheet doesn't come off quickly enough. The thing backs, the bow gets knocked down, and then the jib actually blows through, and then the new trimmer is just pulling forever trying to bring it on. So it definitely is a timing thing. Right. All right.
And, if you've got someone calling the wind gusts as well, like if you can tell whether it's, if you've been lifting, for 4 or 5 minutes on one angle, and then it starts to knock you, then that's a good time to go. But like, you obviously, you have to take into account where the rest of the traffic is, what the other boats are doing on the course, and also you like you say, you don't want to tack in a big gust, because it's just going to make it a whole lot harder. And so you better just sail for another 20 meters till you're through the gust, and then put it in.
No, I know on my boat I like to count the tacks in, so I'll say to everybody, ready to tack, and then I'm waiting for a ready to come back, and sometimes, and then I will count in a 3, 2, 1, and I don't push the helm until I say I'm tacking. But sometimes, and it happened a lot on the weekend because it was quite shifty, I'd say ready to tack, and then I'd have to just say hold. Because I just needed another 20 seconds either to wait for the flat spot or that puff to get to us before we then went into the tack. So communication is really important, and everyone should, amongst your crews, sit down and say, well, what's our communication going to be? And then when I'm saying ready to tack, well, in fact, we always have our the windward, the new winch loaded up, ready to go. Because skippers, have a habit of throwing in crash tacks too.
And like when you say ready to go, the releasing trimmer will climb off the rail and start to get down there, because it's obviously going to take more time than the 3 seconds that you're pulling it as you're going into the tack. So as soon as they hear ready to tack, they think, right, I've got to get off the rail now and get down there, and you make sure you don't have a handle in it and so when you get down there, you make sure that the winch is ready to go. And as you start counting 3, 2, you might want to take 2 turns off the winch and still be holding on to it. So as soon as you get to that point where you put the helm down and the boat turns, that then you can release the rest of the turns and throw the jib off.
As a main sheet trimmer, would you also pull the main on as you're going through the tack? Some boats like to do that to just give you a little bit more of
I don't generally. Like I drop as we go into the tack, drop the traveller, and I'd be it depends what size boat it is as well, doesn't it? Because sometimes pulling on 2 inches of main sheet isn't going to make a whole heap of difference in terms of your speed into the tack, but it's got a lot more effect on where the traveller is, I think. And so like if you hold the traveller up until you're in the tack and then you drop it down, then
it's the same effect.
That's the same effect. And so the traveller is actually easier to operate in the tack than the sheet in a lot of circumstances. And so like you can hold the traveller up as you approach the tack, and then let it go, and then grab the new side of the traveller and start hauling on that as the boat, as the jib comes on, and you're coming up to course again. And like most boats do sail slightly deep for 20 meters or something after you come out of the tack till everything's up to speed, and then they start winding on the headsail, and then you start pulling the traveller up and getting the main back on, so that then everything's trimmed in hard as you come back on the wind. And that'll keep the boat going faster through the water as well.
I think a lot of the boats that everyone's sailing to, I'm sure they've got instruments on board that will give them speed. And I think it's always interesting to know what's your general speed as you're going along. Are you doing 5.5 knots, 6 knots? And then actually appreciate how long it takes you after you tack to get back up to that target speed. So, and you'll be surprised, sometimes it can take as much as a minute to get back up there.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially with big, heavy boats. And so that's why it just becomes so important, one, to understand, do I really need to make that tack? And then to be able to pull it off and do it well. So we've got a question here from Sophia, who's, can you explain how to identify gusts and enable calling them effectively?
Okay. Well, like if you're looking at the water from the rail, you can see you probably want to be looking 100 meters, like mostly 50 meters to 100 meters away from the boat, and generally forward of the stays, up in that direction ahead of you. So like if you imagine it's a clock, if you're sitting on the port side of the boat, you'd be looking at 11 o'clock to 10 o'clock sort of thing ahead of you, and you can see the breeze building on the water, and depending how much wind there is, there'll be a bigger impact on the water or less if it's light. But you can see the dark patches coming towards you, and a lift will come at you from the bow side of the from the outboard side of the boat, and a knock will come at you from the bow side of the boat. So that, like, I'm not very good still at picking lifts and knocks. I know Karen is, and that, I mean, I can see them, and I'm probably right, I don't know, 30 or 40% of the time, whereas Karen and Vanessa, you probably get it right 99% of the time, I think.
I think it definitely is just an observation thing. Keep looking and then give it your best shot. And you don't get it right all of the time, but unless you take a guess.
And the more you do it, the more you figure out what it's going to do, because then you're actually thinking about it. So like if you're sitting there calling it and people are listening to you, you're going to say, yeah, there's a gust coming in. I generally call how many boat lengths it is till it hits us. And some people call seconds, but I tend to call boat lengths, or that, I mean, some people that I sail with say, no, I want you to call it in seconds. And so you call it in seconds. Like you look up the track and you go, yeah, there's a gust coming to us in 10 seconds. And when it's near you, you'll say gust in 2, 1, and then you'll feel the boat heel over and the gust will impact you. Now, if you get it wrong, the boat doesn't heel over, there's no gust, but like you just carry on doing it, because the more information that you're putting up, the better you're going to get at, 1, recognizing it, and 2, being able to actually do it. And it's just that, it's practice.
Yeah. So, and generally on our boats too, I will have someone who's looking at that closer range, calling the gusts in the immediate that are coming in to affect us. But then I have someone who's looking further up the track, and they're actually looking beyond the top mark and, giving me an idea. So, for example, when I'm working up the harbour, if something's looking different up at Manly, I know that's going to be with us in maybe 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, that's right. And you also have, you can look at the boats further up the harbour, like you say, and what angle are they on compared to what angle we're on, and the boats around us down here, and be able to see, oh, look, it looks like the breeze is to the left up there or to the right up there, whether they're pointing one way or the other, and
yeah, whether there's a lift or a knock coming. Yeah, you can definitely read
so
the angles.
There's 2 different things. There's the information you're giving the helm and the main sheet and the trimmers that's impacting directly on how you're sailing the boat, and then the information that you're giving the skipper and the tactician about what's happening further up the track, about what they might want to do, or where they might want to position the boat so that you can take advantage of that when you get up there.
A question here from Julie. Any advice on when you have to tack and there's a gust, any precautions?
With the crew?
Well, I mean, I think sometimes, if Australia's there, you've got to tack.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Australia's the first priority, isn't it?
And I suppose sometimes, when you start looking a little bit closely at the different angles, sometimes you actually do want to get in and complete your tack before the gust hits you, so that you will be on the lifted tack coming out of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm.
And if you've got another boat approaching you that you have to give way to, then obviously that's a priority to tack. It doesn't matter what the gust is doing. Like you have to turn the boat because there's another boat there that you might have to give way to. And so that's a priority. So there is a kind of scale of things that are ideal or not ideal. I was just kind of talking about if you're out there and there's nobody else around you, then you can pick the ideal place to tack on a wind shift or a gust. But if there's traffic around you and they're dictating where you need to go, then you've got to take that as your first priority in the decision-making process.
And I have to say, being out on the water yesterday when, I think it was gusting to 30, it was, the readings from Port Denison and Sydney Harbour both had, it averaging about 22 knots, but, the gusts were coming through 28, 30. And when they came, in fact, you just actually didn't want anyone around you.
Yeah, well,
because they literally were. We were doing everything just to keep the boat upright, and even though you've eased your main, you've headed up, and I think that is a thing. The windier it gets, the more distance you want between you and anything that's solid. Just you will always need to have safety as number one.
Yeah, that's right.
Safety of your crew and look after your boat. So, good. All right. So, unless everyone's got any other questions, what I was thinking when we head out on the water tomorrow, it might be a good opportunity for everybody to sail the actual course. I know over the last few weeks we've been just going between Naval Number 2 and the Kentucky Fried Chicken mark, and not many people were taking the opportunity to actually pole out as they went downwind. And to me, okay, we've been working on our upwind communications and we've been trying to work out, how we're going to tack and how we're going to set our boat up. But it's just as important when we go downwind that we can put as much sail area out there as possible to push us along. And it does take time to get that silly pole hooked up to the topping lift and get it out there. So the more you can think about that in advance, the quicker you will be at getting it out there and getting your boat moving as fast as possible downwind. Any tips with a whisker pole? Or sorry, it's not a whisker pole, it's just a pole.
Of poling out for the spinnaker, or are you?
No, just we sail non-spinnaker in our mixed division boat.
Yeah, well, I think you don't have to worry too much about the topping lift and the kicker when it's on a headsail, because the topping lift helps you get it out there, but because of the shape of the headsail and the sheet, it's going to actually hold the pole in place. And so when you clip it up and you're pulling it through, just someone to stand there and push the pole forward so that it's at the clew end of the sail, and then pull the sheet back. And I don't think that the topper and the kicker are quite as important when you're poling out the headsail as they are with the spinnaker.
Yeah, I don't know. My experience is those poles seem to be very heavy, so you want all the help you can get.
On the head. Yeah.
Oh, you don't want to hit you on the head, but even to actually lift up, I think if you can get someone at the back working on the topper, I really think that helps.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if there's no more questions, thanks for that, Lindy. I've really enjoyed listening to that. I've enjoyed listening, getting a refresh on your Hobart experience. I'm not sure if I'm ready to sign up for that again. Yet. I think I've done 2 offshore races in my life now.
Yeah, well, it's funny that 3 of the girls on that boat are now the top, they've done more Hobarts than any other women. Vanessa and Adrian, and Sue Crafer's not up there with them. I think she's at about 15, Gail Harlan, she wasn't actually on the boat. I was thinking she was,
Mhm.
and she's right behind Vanessa, I think. So
It's a number of Hobarts, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how I think Adrian only had 3 then, and now she's got 26 or something. So
wow, time flies, doesn't it?
Yeah, she's been doing it for a long time.
Kathy's just got a quick question here. Is it best to use an outboard sheet when using a pole with a heady, and the outboard sheet going through a block forward to the normal jib position? Well, the blocks, I'm not quite understanding that. Are you talking about using an extra sheet, Kathy? Yeah. Oh, sorry. She's saying it's a statement rather than a question. She's saying it's best to use an outboard sheet when using a pole with a heady.
Yeah. Well, it is if the heady clues outside the lifelines.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's right. So the sheet doesn't pull down the lifelines. All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Lindy. Been wonderful to catch up.
It's lovely to see you again.
Good luck tomorrow. I know RPA Tuesday Twilights are setting off tomorrow night. Yep. We've got another practice session, and then I'm really pleased to announce officially that Pass Bailey are joining us again this season, and we'll be launching that partnership in the newsletter this week.
Oh, and, I could have put my pearls on for the season.
Oh, yes, yep. I could have too, actually. So, yes, they'll definitely be on board for our first race is the 10th of November. I think we all tap out for Melbourne Cup Day, but we'll
wise move. Yep.
Yeah, wise move. I think I hear they did it once and it wasn't good. It wasn't a good look. But yeah, we started
our races at RPA every second Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And it always starts so that we start the week before Melbourne Cup so that
you can do that.
Cup. Yeah.
So I look forward to seeing everybody on the 10th of November. Okay, and thanks very much.
Enjoy.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
Thanks.
See you, Lindy.
Yes, you're right.